Welcome to Old Guy Tech,
the OGT.TV recording studio.
Technology for the rest of us.
Hey, this is Rob with Old Guy Tech TV, and I'm here today with Dylan Sullivan, running for judge in El Dorado County. Dylan, thank you very much for coming on a little Old Guy Tech TV here.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're here, and I'm going to ask some questions. Two things. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for running. Because, and I tell everybody who runs for office, it's probably the most thankless thing that you're going to do. It takes so much of your time and effort, and that's the only way that our country runs is by people like you willing to run. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it, because I won't do it. And so to start in a little bit, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. We'll get it started that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it is interesting about running. I think it's one of the most vulnerable things that a person does.
It opens you up to everything, doesn't it?
It does,
yeah.
And I think it takes a certain level of courage to do it. So I commend my opponent and also the other people that are running for supervisor and the other positions and the other judgeship.
Sure.
Because I agree with you. It's a big deal to run.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
So a little bit about myself is that I am on the bench now. I'm one of the judicial officers in El Dorado County. Mm-hmm. I am a Superior Court Commissioner. I was hired by the judges in the county to be their Superior Court Commissioner, and because of the circumstances in El Dorado County, the presiding judge has assigned me my own courtroom, and I hear cases in South Lake Tahoe and also in Placerville, and it's been a really great experience.
Yeah, I imagine it was. What type of cases do you hear?
Right now I hear all the family law cases in South Lake Tahoe, the domestic violence cases, CPS cases, which are really, really rewarding and really difficult at the same time. Unlawful detainers, traffic, there are days that I pinch hit and do arraignments, CMC calendars and civil. So, and I do all of the cases that the Department of Child Support Services files as well.
So you get some of the real tough stuff. Kids are always difficult.
Yeah, I mean, they are, but also there are a lot of days where I feel like I'm their champion. So it's rewarding, but it's really difficult work. Yeah,
I imagine. I can see that. Well, that's great. I'm glad you really like that. So how about one of the things that I ask people a lot of times, how does your family feel about you running? I mean, I know a lot of time for family, it takes time away, and you get your family support?
Oh, of course. I have my family support.
Good.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
There's not much of me to go around with running a courtroom and running for office. So it's difficult, but it's short term. And
well, good.
I think in life that's part of what we do is we support the people we love.
Yeah, we've had people that sometimes their family just doesn't support it. It's very difficult. And, like I said, we need people. Believe it or not, we got a call. So you're going to let's see who this is.
This means that I'm supposed to put this on.
Yeah, let's see. Hi, you're on Old Guy Tech TV. Who do we have?
Piper Rulis.
All right. Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Would you, I'm just going to give you a little more of a volume here. So, you got an opportunity to watch us live. Do you have a question for Dylan?
I do have a question for Dylan.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who this was.
Piper Rulis.
Ah, hi. How's it going?
Hi.
Good. Go ahead.
The feedback is
there's a little bit.
strange.
Yeah, you got to get used to it.
Sorry.
She's out of her element, okay? She's not sitting on a bench. She's in this little studio with me.
That's fine. It's all new to all of us.
That's right.
Technology stuff.
So what's your question?
I wanted to know, Ms. Sullivan, why after 2 years and right before an election for judge did you change your political party from Democrat to the Climate State, or Independent, whatever you want to call it?
I'm sorry, you said something right before the word independent.
Yeah, she asked why you changed affiliations.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I changed affiliations because I feel more comfortable. Can Can I take this off?
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry. Because I feel more comfortable on the bench as an unaffiliated. I personally was having a difficult time for several years. It started actually when I was at the parole board. I think that it's critical that the judiciary remain independent, remain apolitical, and we live in a very political county, and the presiding judge is also unaffiliated. I had a lot of conversations with her about it. I feel more comfortable as an unaffiliated because I don't want anybody to come into my courtroom and have a misperception about them being able to get a fair hearing based on my political party.
Okay, good. Piper, thank you very much for calling.
That's a fair answer. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Bye.
Well, that was okay. That was a tough first question to get you on, huh?
I don't know. It's fine. I actually am happy for people to ask any questions.
Well,
that
it's
they're concerned
wonderful.
about.
And see, that's part of this. We have no idea how many people are watching us, but Piper, thank you very much. And the other people, again, 621-1210, it's there.
It's really hard to talk
Is it?
with this on. Yeah.
Yeah, because you hear yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like I think part of it is from being on the bench. I know that I have to wait for someone to stop talking before I talk.
Right.
And so I'm doing the same thing to myself.
Yeah,
which
there you go.
Doesn't make any sense.
Well,
of
that's
course.
okay. You'll only have to wear it to hear their question, and then
Okay,
we'll ask them.
sounds good.
Sometimes what we'll do is have them ask a question, and they can go off. So, the courts have had some fiscal issues going on and some facility issues going on. What do you have any ideas about how we're going to deal with facilities and financial matters with the courts in El Dorado County?
I do, and the reason I'm hesitating is that it is, on the one hand, bigger than El Dorado County, and on the other hand, El Dorado County,
Right.
I think, could, as a county, decide to become more involved, not just in the facilities as it relates to the courts, but in the facilities generally. Generally the county buildings, whether it's the sheriff's building or many of the county buildings are somewhat old.
Oh,
and
yeah.
could use some
They're
rehab.
terrible.
And as it relates to the courts, there is the problem that we are all over the county in these different little pockets, and there's no centralization. On the one hand, that's good because it gives people in those neighborhoods access, although because the courts are very specialized,
Right.
it only gives them access to whatever that court's about.
Right. So we have the court in Tahoe, in Placerville, in Cameron Park.
And Building C,
And Building C.
and the juvenile court.
That's right.
So what's interesting is historically I think Building C was supposed to be courts.
Right.
And it was supposed to be a big enough facility to integrate the courts with a few satellites, which would be more typical of other counties. The obvious disadvantage is that we have staff all over the place, which requires duplication of effort and is not as efficient as it would be if we had staff all centralized and also management centralized.
Right.
I mean, there is also a duplication of management just by virtue, and this is not me talking specifically about our management, but just generally, if you have satellites all over the place, it requires more management.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
having worked for the parole board, we had really similar issues, and I worked for part of the time I was there on dealing with those issues. So the bigger picture is that in 1997 there was the consolidation of the courts where the courts went from being county entities funded by the counties to being a state entity. And so the part that's challenging for El Dorado County and frankly the smaller counties and the mid-sized counties is that while overall the courts have taken huge hits, we've taken really huge hits when you look at it per capita and you look at it in percentage-wise. And so, for instance, right now in the current governor's budget, the proposal is to give the courts $100 million in restoration funding, basically. But in this fiscal year that's about to end, we're projected to be $70 million short. So you've got counties all over the state that are counting on this money to come in. Yet,
they're not gonna be
70%
able
of it is already spent because we've already spent it. And the legislature in the last couple of years has changed the structure of not just how courts are funded, but also how courts can use their budgets. So it used to be that if you were thrifty and you ran a budget really well and you were efficient, that you could save money. And then when you had issues, you would have some money. Now you can only have fund balances of 1%. So our budget is about $8 million in that neighborhood. So we're talking about $80,000.
Right.
Well, the problem is that doesn't even cover
Nothing.
1 month of payroll.
Right.
So it's really put the courts in a difficult position. And, there are groups that would argue that this is down to the foundation. It's a constitutional issue that, that you can't maintain a balance of powers between the three branches if one branch is being starved out financially. Now, I'm just saying what some people would argue.
Yeah, I
mean,
it's an interesting argument because
yeah.
I've never thought about it being involved that way. I do understand, such as the sheriff's situation. They're in also a dire situation when they're building, and they have a similar problem. They're spread all over, and like you said, duplication of jobs, and it just costs so much more to do what they're doing.
It's just not efficient.
Yeah. And then, yet, on the other hand, it's tough to get the funding to do what you need to do, and
especially in these fiscal times when you've
yeah.
got to have a capital outlay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. There are some creative ways that I know that some of the counties have been able to get buildings by lease-back programs and some of the other things that are available, but you have to get very creative with those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not always there. But I definitely think that both on the sheriff's department side and the court side, it would be nice to they have something where we can actually save money, be more efficient, and have it easier on you, and when you're in court, because all the staff's there. So.
Well, the other piece I think that's interesting that you're bringing up related to the sheriff is that as the county makes these decisions about how we're going to move forward with facilities, that is the courts and the sheriff, that there needs to be some real consideration as to the criminal courts and how we're going to work together.
Good point.
Because there are places there where we could also reduce duplication of services if our central operations are close enough to each other that we can come up with ways.
Transportation of prisoners is what we're...
Well, transportation of prisoners, but not just transportation of prisoners, all the paperwork that goes back and forth between the courts and the sheriff and also other local law enforcement could really be centralized. We could have positions that are crossover positions that kind of liaison between the two to help us be more efficient.
Yeah. I think it would be good. It is interesting, because all the large or the rich counties have these palaces, and you have to say that some of these courts are just incredible.
Well,
and
we certainly don't have palaces, but
certainly don't.
But we work hard in them like they are.
That's right. We do what we can.
Yeah.
I was even. I think you do what you do and you get through it. But it would be nice to have. I hate seeing money being wasted. And that's what I feel like we're doing because we don't have that centralized government there because of, as you mentioned, all the duplication that's going on. And so it bothers me because I don't think it's the wise use of the public's money.
I couldn't agree more. And frankly, in the 21st century, we really have an opportunity through technology to be much more efficient than we are. And, the difficult thing that you've already touched on, just like with facilities, there's got to be some money up front to put us into the 21st century.
Right.
But then once we get there, we can be so much more efficient that I think we can really save dollars. And the other issue that is equally important, or maybe more important, is that because of all the budget cuts to the courts, we're really having access issues. That is, the public is really having a difficult time accessing the courts, and this is a constitutional issue. I mean, people have to be able to access the courts.
Right.
If our democracy is going to work, people have to be able to get to a courtroom if they have a dispute. And, there are all kinds of disputes, but it is as important as people that need restraining orders who can't get to a courtroom to ask for one, or because we're so short-staffed, I might issue a restraining order in the morning and not be able to get it back to that person on the same day. And, one, the law requires me to, and so we work really hard to do it.
Right.
At other things not getting done.
Right.
And, secondly, while the restraining order would still go into the system so that law enforcement can see it, if somebody is in need of a restraining order to the point that they've gone to this effort and the court has said, yes, I see based on what you're saying that this is a valid request, they're going to feel a lot better if they have that piece of paper in their hand. And what I know from issuing lots of restraining orders is that they're the basic terms, but if you're doing a good job on the bench, you really have to look at cases individually and look at what is happening for individual people. And so that requires, even in restraining orders at times, that you're making individual orders. And if the person doesn't have that in their hands and the officer comes out and they're saying, yeah, but the judge said they want, you know.
Well, it's their life. I mean,
Yeah.
a restraining order isn't taken lightly. And obviously, like you mentioned, if they've gone to the effort to get that, usually they're scared for their lives.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's an important thing. So.
That's just an example that I think people can relate to, but there are real access to justice issues going on with these budget cuts.
Yeah, I think so. So hopefully something can be done for both the courts and the sheriff's department. That'd be really good. I've got some random questions as I was working through this, and I'm going to just throw some different things out at you. What's your feeling on drug testing for requirements to be hired in governmental positions?
You mean in terms of policy, or?
Yeah, in terms of policies.
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is that I have to be really careful about how I answer questions because I'm already on the bench, and there are judicial ethics that require me not to give my opinion about things, cases or controversies that might come in front of me.
Okay.
And so drug testing
Could be one. Okay,
yeah.
I'm good. I understand.
But,
remember, I told you
I mean,
I knew.
generally, I would say if it's a safety position, and this is what the law says, so
Right.
I'll tell you what the law says,
Okay.
and I would apply the law.
All right.
And that is that if it's a safety position, that is, big machinery or public transportation or anything that would put either that person, their coworkers, or the public at risk,
Right.
then drug testing is not only allowable under the law, but expected.
And appropriate.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. Well, let's see now on things that we can't ask you.
Well, look, here's the thing. I know the law pretty well.
I know.
And so
I'll keep asking
I'm
until you
happy
can answer one.
Yeah, I mean, we could play.
Well, I'll tell you
Stump
what.
the commissioner, if you want.
Yeah, there's some things. There's a few things that I know that we can talk about. Let's talk about your schooling a little bit because we didn't really get into that. Why don't you talk about why you decided to become an attorney and what made you decide you wanted to become a commissioner in this whole process?
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think about how far to go back.
Well, let's go back to early college. You're out of high school and you're in the college.
All right. So going to college for me was a big deal. I'm the first of all of my siblings and cousins to go to college. I'm only the second person in my family at all to go to college.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
I
It is.
appreciate
It's
that
a
you
big
recognize
deal.
that.
Yeah.
I was born. My mother was a teenager when I was born, and there's three of us that were born in very close proximity to each other, and we were raised by a single mother who worked really hard. And I knew from a very young age that in order to change my circumstances, I had to take personal responsibility for that. And I was very driven at a young age to go to college and to create a better life for myself than the one that I was born into. So I really felt privileged to go to college. And I played basketball in college, which was a lot of fun.
Oh, I bet.
And when I was young, I didn't think that I was very smart. So I thought the only way I could get to college, even though I ended up being the valedictorian in high school.
I read that.
I didn't think I was very smart. So for a long time, I thought the only way I would go to college is sports. I guess it turned out that I was smarter than I was more smart than I was an athlete, but I didn't understand that, and I still am
You
not.
were one of those smart girls. I can tell.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. It depends on what actually you can do with it. So at any rate, I loved college and
So
I
where'd
loved
you go?
law school. I went to UC Davis, and after college, I did not go to law school. I went to work for UC Davis Medical Center in the OR, and which was a great experience, really interesting in trauma. And then this guy comes around and he's trying to recruit my boss to go into medical sales. My boss has got 2 little kids, and he says, I can't do it, but you should talk to Dylan because she would be really good at this. And so I got recruited by this medical company, and I went to work for this medical company, which was fantastic. And I was involved in product development and marketing and sales. And eventually I promoted. So I was in charge of everything from the Mississippi through Hawaii. I actually had 1 year where I had, the first year after I got promoted, I had 35% increase in revenue.
Wow.
Which was...
Wow. And trips to Hawaii, what matter you
And trips
want?
to Hawaii. I mean, hey, you got to make the money while you can make the money.
You got it, that's right.
So at any rate, that was a really good experience. And during the course of product development, I was being exposed to the law. And there's just something inside of me from the time that I probably graduated from high school or a little bit earlier than that, where I really felt like it was my responsibility to give back to the community because the community had really given to me when I was a young person. And this may sound crazy because before we got on the air, you were joking around about lawyers.
Yeah.
But I thought that would be a good way to give back to the community. So I continued to work while I went to law school, and I went to McGeorge at night, and that was also a wonderful experience.
Oh, yeah. Great school.
Fantastic school. Yeah, I really learned a lot. And I left law school really feeling like I understood the framework by which our society is run. And then I looked around and went, oh, wow, but a whole bunch of people don't understand it. And that creates a lot of conflict in our society.
Yeah.
So after law school, I had done well in law school, so kind of the bigger firms were asking me to come work there, and I interviewed with a couple of them, and it just didn't feel right. So actually, I canceled my second interviews and decided to hang up a shingle and open my own practice.
Try to do it from the ground up.
Well,
huh?
I'll tell you what, if you want to learn how to practice law,
Yeah.
hang a shingle and start talking to people and learn how to do intake and learn how to do all the discovery yourself and write all the motions and keep everything filed
Yeah,
and
because
keep
it's
everything
you.
organized.
Yeah,
And it's you
yeah,
and you.
it's you and you.
You're the receptionist and
Right.
and and then as things progress, you get people to help you and I thought it was great. I mean, when I look back at my career, I can see that on the one hand at points I was a small business owner and I worked for this medical manufacturer that ended up being international. The guy that owns it is just a fantastic person. I could go on that tangent for a long time, but I won't.
Yeah.
And so I was working in the corporate world, which is a completely different paradigm than government.
Absolutely.
And then eventually I went to work for the parole board, and during times at the parole board, I was in charge of big projects or large groups of people, and managing that was completely different than managing a private industry group.
Sure. Right.
But at the same time, I thought that when I was at the parole board that I really brought this common sense about it, number one. And number two, they would always say, oh, Dylan, come on. We can't get that done in a year. This is government. And I would say, oh, yes, we can. Watch us get it done in a year. And so, I think I've brought some of those motivational skills and those management skills to government, and I think it allowed me to get some things done at the parole board.
Yeah. That would be interesting. I could see the parole board being you got somebody's life in your hands in that one, and you want to make sure you make that right decision for the community.
Yeah, it's talk about a difficult decision. You really, it's the essence of liberty, right? Because there are people that are sentenced with the possibility of parole with the expectation that they're going to be paroled, and they come in front of the parole board. I mean, we do other things besides that, but that's a big chunk of what the parole board does. And they come in front of the parole board, and the standard is that you're supposed to release them unless they would pose a risk of danger to the community.
Right.
Well, that's a big unless.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is not something that anybody that works for the parole board takes lightly.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Yeah.
And fortunately or unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, this is not the unfortunate part, but I managed people. I managed deputy commissioners for a while who were making these decisions, and on panels with commissioners making these decisions, and they just never really learned how to come to neutral. They were still advocating instead of being able to really truly sit in the neutral and try and figure out what the facts are and try and figure out whether this person is dangerous or not. And so it's not something to be taken lightly.
So do you feel all this experience that you've had really translates well to the judgeship?
Yeah, when I first took the bench, they give me this family law assignment, right? It's family law and the things I've already told you. And I'm thinking, well, I've never done any of this. I mean, I did a little bit of family law when I was a sole practitioner, but, to be totally honest, I tried to avoid it. I just, people don't behave very well in family law court.
It's ugly.
And, it's ugly. And so I didn't particularly like it. So then I find myself being on the family law bench, which I thought was very ironic. And I'm looking at, CPS cases and domestic violence cases and family law, and I'm thinking, how does my experience translate to this?
Right.
But what was interesting is the minute that I took the bench, and actually to be completely forthright, about 10 minutes in, I was on the bench. I remember specifically this Monday morning in Placerville that I took the bench, and at first I just felt shell-shocked, like, what is going on out there? What am I doing up here? And then this guy didn't show up on, he's a return on a bench warrant. And so I look at him and I'm like, sir, why didn't you show up to my court? And like within 10 minutes it was my court, right?
Yeah.
Which I didn't even realize I was doing. It just clicked. And he's like, and I said, sir, this is important. You're costing the taxpayers money when you don't show up. I need you to be here. Other people were here expecting you to be here. And then like suddenly it was just like, oh, wait a second, I know how to do this. And I would say that what I really know how to do is listen and be fair and not bring my personal life or my politics or my anything to it, because frankly, it doesn't have anything to do with me. And and I think that skill set coupled with dealing with really hardcore criminals. When you deal with really hardcore criminals, people having family law disputes,
Doesn't seem so bad, huh?
Well,
When you got this guy and it's, murdered somebody.
It's all a matter of perspective.
It's true.
And then the other thing is, in the CPS cases, and there's some family law cases and some DV cases that are really CPS cases that haven't made it there, or CPS cases that are on the way out.
Right.
And in those instances, having worked with parolees and also probationers in private practice, I know a lot about those family dynamics, and so I have an ability to talk to people about what's really going on with them, and to be really straightforward about it, also from my childhood, I understand the people I'm making decisions about, and so I think it helps me make good decisions.
Yeah, I could see that. That's, boy, you really took it on, didn't you?
I think it's a good fit. I really enjoy it, and I'm lucky. I, as a young person, realized that I wanted to give back to my community. People really helped me when I was a kid. They took an interest in me, and there were people along the way that pointed me in the right direction when I could have really gone in the wrong direction.
Right.
And
Be a basketball star.
Well, right.
Sorry.
I'm just not that good. I mean, let's be honest.
I know
Plus,
how that feels.
Plus my knees
Me
are
either.
shot. So, but my point is that I just feel really fortunate because I set out to serve my community, and on a daily basis, I serve my community.
Oh, got another call.
Here.
Let's see how this works here. Hi, it's Rob, and you're on the phone with Dylan Sullivan, running for judge. Who do we have? Hello?
Hello.
You're on. Ask your question, please.
Okay. I was listening to Dylan, and I have read someplace that she calls herself conservative financially. And I read someplace that she declared bankruptcy when she went into the state after her law practice.
Okay, is that your only question? Because Dylan can't hear. She'll have to take off the headset. I just want to make sure that you got your question in.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to answer that? It's up to you.
I'm happy to answer
Okay.
whatever people want to ask, as long as it doesn't violate my judicial ethics.
Okay, so listen, you can listen back on air. I'm going to hang up on you. She's going to answer your question, okay?
I'm not sure that I actually heard a question, but what I heard was that she read somewhere that I call myself a fiscal conservative,
Right.
and that I declared bankruptcy after my law practice.
That's what she asked. So you did hear her question.
So I didn't declare bankruptcy after my law practice. I declared bankruptcy in 2000 when I transitioned from being in medical sales to having my own practice. And fiscal conservatism is an interesting. It's interesting to me because I find a lot of people call themselves fiscal conservatives, but they don't actually know very much about
What that means?
what it means
Yeah.
about finances, about well, all kinds of things. But I would just say that fiscal conservatism, that I have an opportunity working in government to be fiscally conservative, not just in how I run a courtroom or how, as judges, we run a courthouse, but also in individual decisions. And that is different than my personal life
Right.
and my bankruptcy.
Right.
And, you know, I mean,
Well,
frankly,
facts
there
are-
are plenty of people that had financial struggles and
Absolutely.
and-
Bad things happen to good people all the
yeah.
time.
So
And-
at any rate,
yeah, and I'm not. I would have never asked that question. So,
Well, you know
but the people want to know. So,
I don't have any problem with what people want to ask. As a matter of fact, we are about to elect a judge who will probably sit for the next 20 years.
right.
So the people should be comfortable with who they're going to elect. And, you know, I have a proven track record. I've done a good job on the bench. If I hadn't done a good job on the bench, I wouldn't have 7 of the 8 judges endorsing me, including the presiding judge, the assistant presiding judge, the juvenile judge. Our bench is made up of Republicans. There is one who's who's a declined to state,
Right.
and me and Republicans. So I would just say, who better to judge, who to be your next judge than the judges? They know what it takes to do this job. They know that I do it well. And if the Republican bench, if I'm good enough for the Republican bench, I think I'm good enough for the Republicans of El Dorado County, including the fiscal conservatives.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. How about then? Let's talk a little bit about any affiliations that you might have. Any professional affiliations or any other groups that you're part of?
Well,
Is there-
El
are
Dorado
there-
County Bar Association.
Bar Association. Okay, I mean I didn't know if there were state associations or
Yeah,
other things.
you
that
know, California Judges Association. I'm a member of the Alliance Judges. I'm a member of. So there's 2 different groups of judges, and I'm a member of both. By the way, the Alliance Judges are very fiscally conservative, and they endorse me.
Oh, okay.
Their platform is that the judiciary, that judges are independent constitutional officers, and that the judges themselves should be in charge of running the courts as opposed to administrative bodies. And I think that, you know, that's the surface, but under the surface, there's a bunch of issues regarding the finances of running the courts.
So, help me here. The judges at this point, there's actually an administrator that oversees all the financial needs of the courts?
Yeah, it's called the AOC, which is, the trial courts are run by the Judicial Council.
Okay.
Judicial Council is made up of 30 members. I think that it's right that 21 of them are judges, and or 21 of them are voting members, and they have an administrative branch called the Administration of the Courts, or the AOC, and the AOC, a lot of the things that the Judicial Council does, they direct the AOC to do. So there's that, and this is common in government, that there's this tension between the body that makes the substantive decisions
right.
and the body that administers those decisions. So
Right. Yeah. I can see where that could be tough. It's almost a parent relationship, isn't it?
well,
That's what it sounds like.
yeah. I mean, other affiliations. I'm on the Collaborative Courts Advisory Committee to the Judicial Council. I'm on the El Dorado County Child Abuse Prevention Council. I do a lot of work in the community, and I'm involved
Yeah.
with a lot of community
Well,
groups.
people just like to know, what groups you might be affiliated with, and I thought I'd just ask. And I think you answered that very well. I mean, you're a busy person.
I
I
am
see
definitely
that.
a busy person.
Yeah. So let's get a little bit into you're running for a public position, a very, very important one, and you get to that position by being elected. How has your voting past been? Have you voted in every election, or have you skipped years, or?
Oh yeah, I've skipped years.
Yeah. So did you feel at the times you may have skipped years that your vote just doesn't count?
No, I wouldn't say that.
No.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say there's been times when I've been disenfranchised,
Right.
where I didn't really feel an identity to the Democrats or the Republicans, and I would say that that's probably
Yeah.
the main reason. I mean,
Well, disenfranchised is a
actually-
good word. I mean,
yeah.
I understand that. And, one of the things I ask, and particularly the supervisors, we get into their voting history a little bit, and we get into everybody's history a little bit, because it always strikes me as, and it's nothing against you on this, but a little odd that a person wants to become a political entity, and unfortunately our judges are that, and yet they haven't really voted in all the times that they've had the opportunity to. And what I always encourage young people is, the one thing that you really have is that ability to go and vote. And if you're going to complain about it, you can't complain unless you voted. And that's my
Agreed.
philosophy.
Yeah.
So just real short, I love this story. We did 2 years ago, we did a interview at the elections office. We went in elections and saw how it worked and everything, and then we set up outside. And we got to see people coming in, and I remember this young couple, very young, early 20s, and I, why are you here? And they want to go, it's the very, very first time I've ever voted, and I really wanted to vote in this thing. And it was just so rewarding to see this.
Yeah,
you
no,
know?
absolutely.
It's a really rewarding feeling. So it's really important that, the people out there, you guys, thanks for calling and asking questions too, because it is important. It's a very important thing.
Yeah, I agree. There's been other times during my life that I've been out drumming up people to vote. I worked on a city council race. I worked on getting people to register to vote. So, I would say it's fluid.
Yeah, getting out there and walking the streets and talking to people, you get some really interesting people to talk to.
Oh man,
out
it's
there.
it's
Isn't that
actually
something?
really interesting.
It
It's
is.
really fun.
It-
I have to say that that campaigning, while it's exhausting, has been really great, because I've really been able to see the diversity in the county, and it's not just the beautiful county that's green and has a bunch of mountains in it. There are really different interests in this county, really different types of people. It's been really rewarding. It's been great. And I think it makes me better on the bench also, because now when somebody comes in front of me from Cool or from Fairplay, I know where that is in the county.
Right.
I know, generally what their, generally what markets are there, if you will. And it just gives me a better feel for what the person's talking about.
You know where they're at, and you get, your mind says, okay, I know your location and what's going on, and it helps a little bit. How's the fundraising going?
I think it's going really well.
Yeah, are you doing a lot of it yourself, or are you getting a number of cash coming into the campaign? Or because a lot of people do pay for their own campaign a lot of the times, and then hope for the money to come in at the end.
Yeah.
And you doing pretty good on that?
I put some money in up front, and I've been actually. I talk to the consultants. They say you need to keep fundraising. All you should be doing is talking to voters and fundraising. And so I keep talking to voters and I keep fundraising, and the money keeps coming in. I was just doing the on our last FPBC filing. I noticed it was judge, attorney, people that work in the courts. It was, and then people from when I go out and talk, then I tend to have people donate. So, I think the fundraising is going great. I think it's really unfortunate, frankly. I mean, I'm still being positive, but I think it's really unfortunate that it costs this kind of money to be a viable candidate because, frankly, it screens out people that are probably really good candidates, not just for judge, but
Every position.
for every position.
Yeah, it does. And, I've been asked for many years to run for a supervisor position, and I always joke that I can't take the pay cut.
Right.
Exactly. And it's very difficult. And then when I help run about 5 different campaigns, and I know what the fundraising means. And I looked at a fundraising for a supervisor, just one district, not like countywide, one district. And this person had to raise $150,000 to run, be able to get everything out there that they needed to get because it was a real contentious race. I just went, I can't do that.
Well, and I'm running a countywide race, so it's
a
very
lot
expensive,
right? And then you've got people. Have you been down in El Dorado Hills?
Oh yeah.
Do they know they're in El Dorado County?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, see?
Yeah, and also I'm not sure if the people in Folsom know they're in Sacramento County.
I know.
And I got to tell you, I came from Sacramento County, but we thought El Dorado Hills was Sacramento County. We thought it was a nice suburb to move to.
Yeah.
So, I think
I
there's
had
some
an
real
experience.
confusion there.
I'll share this wonderful experience with you. I won't tell you who, but we were walking and we were going on the houses and knocked on the door, and a nice lady opened the door and said, "Hi, I'm with so and so, and we just wanted to get you, some information and let you know that I hope you vote in El Dorado County." She says, "I don't live in El Dorado County. This is right here in El Dorado
Right.
Hills."
You opened a door in
I
El
opened the
Dorado
door.
Hills, right?
Yeah, and she says, "I don't." Really?
You don't.
Okay. Well, I really think you do. You might want to look at where your taxes are paid before you make that, right?
Right.
You've got property taxes that say El Dorado County on it, but it just struck. That's one of those stories I've shared for a long time because it just showed me, we used the word disenfranchised. It showed me how almost disenfranchised El Dorado Hills is, and then we've got what's called what do we call it? The granite curtain over at the lake, right?
Right.
So we've got both ends that don't really know where they fit.
Well, and the people in Tahoe definitely are disenfranchised, and it's on both sides. I mean, it's interesting to me because I go across the mountain every week, and now I go across almost every day.
Right.
And the people on the West Slope are resentful of tax dollars going up to Tahoe, and the people in Tahoe are resentful that they're kind of from their perspective, the redheaded
stepchild. That's right.
I don't know what's wrong with red hair.
I don't know either.
Anyway, whatever.
I'm not sure where they came from. Somebody call us up and tell us where that. Oh, never mind. John knows.
Actually,
all right, what is it, John? Tell us. Our producer.
it has to do with the Vikings invading the British Isles.
They were Irish.
A lot of
Redheads.
That's the story I've heard.
Very good, Jonathan.
Well,
thank you.
Let's hear it for the Irish. Being Irish.
There you go. Yeah. Huh? I got some Irish in me too, but we won't go into that. It's a whole thing. Can you talk about immigration at all?
Well, I would give the same.
Okay.
Caveat,
I'm just trying to think.
I think immigration plays a role in our criminal justice system, but I can't really talk about immigration
I was just wondering
policy.
how you felt about illegal aliens, or if there's, but apparently you can't. So, all right, let's try another one here. No, probably can't ask that either. You're making it tough on me.
I'm sure this is the first time that you have had this.
No, I had Judge Phimister that first schooled me on what I'm supposed to ask people and not.
Yeah.
And that was a couple of years ago, and somehow we still get things going here. Because there's things I'd really like to ask you, and I don't want to put you in a bad position here. How about have you done any lobby work? Have you walked the Capitol and talked to legislators and about the court systems or anything like that?
Actually, with the California Judges Association last year, I went to the Capitol and asked for more money for the courts and talked about access to justice issues.
Yeah.
Having worked for the parole board, I knew a few people, and that was nice to be able to have
That connection,
those
yeah.
relationships, to be able to do that. That is one thing, actually, that judges are allowed to be active in, is the funding of the courts and the administration of the courts.
Oh, that's good to know. I'm going to step back for a second because it just dawned on me. I don't understand. How did you get on the parole board? Sorry, I can't talk. How did you get on the parole board?
I was a civil servant, so I was a deputy commissioner, and then I was an associate chief deputy commissioner.
Okay.
The governor appoints, the number changes, but the governor appoints a certain number of commissioners. I think it's 12 at the moment. It's changed a couple times.
Okay.
And then there are deputy commissioners. So, for instance, if you're on a lifer panel, that is a panel to determine whether or not a person should be released to parole, you would have one deputy commissioner and one commissioner.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about
Well, it's
that.
an interesting scheme, right? Because you've got a civil servant, and then you've got a
Appointee.
a governor's appointee.
Yeah.
So it's really is an interesting balance in
It really
coming
becomes
to
a
that decision
real
making.
political entity, doesn't it? I mean, if you look at that, anything that the governor appoints, it becomes, usually it's somebody that unfortunately has contributed a lot of money to a campaign, and they get,
Well, maybe or maybe not. I mean, different governors
Oh,
approach
sure.
it differently, but I think that one piece that people don't realize is that having that civil servant really balances that out, because the job is not beholden to the governor.
Right.
And I mean, on the one hand, you're
civil
working
servant
in
side, yeah.
the civil servant side. You're working for the governor, right? You're in the executive branch.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I sometimes want to give civic lessons. I sometimes give civic lessons in my courtroom because I don't think that people really
They don't.
fully understand the three branches of government.
No, they don't.
But,
even I have to look at it at times and think,
well, I mean, I think we all do, but
Yeah.
but you have the foundation to do the analysis. So when you work for the parole board, you work really close to the boss, the
Right,
governor, right?
right.
Whereas if you work for a local police department, ultimately you work in the executive branch,
Right.
but you don't feel that connection. And so there is that, but as a civil servant, my job was never beholden to the governor. And there were times when deputy commissioner, including myself, especially when there were new appointees, they needed a little time to
get up to
work
speed.
through the
Yeah.
learning curve.
Mhm.
Trying
Learning
to be
curve,
politically
right. Yep.
correct here.
Yeah.
And, they would send some of us out that were, let's say, more skilled at really scouring through a murderer's files to make sure that we had every detail in front of us before we made this decision in order to ensure that we weren't granting parole that shouldn't be granted. And so I was on those, if you will, I was on those teams sometimes where I was sent out to work with a commissioner who there was a perception that they were over granting parole, so
see,
that I
yeah.
could kind of help them see where to look to find those nuances that are
Right.
not all that obvious until you've got some real experience.
It must take quite a bit of time to really go through the records and to really make a sound judgment on
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, there's a misperception that's, for the commissioners, I feel bad for them because they work really hard. And
Yeah.
there's this misperception that it's a governor's appointee and it's a favor and this is a easy job where you're going to make, over $100,000 a year and not do anything. And well, I'm here to tell you those commissioners work hard. And it does take a lot of time to
Yeah.
make a good decision. It takes a lot of also, really being able to see the places where the public safety may be at risk.
That's interesting. Are they almost always lawyers?
The commissioners?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so they
Yeah.
they don't have to be an attorney or
No, and that's actually, well, sometimes that's part of the problem with the learning curve, although it's a balance, right?
Right.
Because they get a lot of people that are law enforcement or within the corrections, and that's an important background, but being a lawyer is also an important background, so the kind of the perfect candidate would be, say, a chief of police who's also a lawyer.
yeah.
But that's not easy to find,
No.
so you try and match the panels so that you get that blend.
I see. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Never gave it a thought before. I know you teach ethics. I believe that's what you told me. Didn't you? I thought I read somewhere you wrote a book or a guide. Am I wrong?
I do publish a chapter every year.
Okay.
It's in this book called CB is Continuing Education of the Bar. That's the publisher. And the book is Criminal Practice and Procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And I write the chapter on parole. And I've been writing it for a decade. So that's nice. And the law has changed tremendously twice in this decade.
Wow.
So first we had the consolidation of the parole board with corrections and also with the Department of Rehabilitation. And that along with this lawsuit called Valdivia that brought due process to parole revocation proceedings, which is different than proceedings where you're determining whether or not to release somebody. Mm-hmm. These are people that have already been released and have allegedly and oftentimes violated their parole. So we had those two changes really around the same time, 2004, 2005, in that area of time. And then, of course, criminal justice realignment. So major changes in the law in this decade that I've been doing this. So it's been challenging, but it's really rewarding.
Good. That's good.
As it relates to ethics, I was asked last year to teach new judge orientation, which is a course that all judges have to take within 6 months of being on the bench.
Right.
Sometimes it's a few months longer just because the availability of the class.
Right.
But the course really focuses on judicial ethics and also courtroom demeanor, and not courtroom demeanor when everything's going well, but courtroom demeanor when
everything's going
going crazy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
So
We've seen a few television versions that are crazy.
Right. We'd like to avoid that in the actual courtrooms.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Oh Lord. Yeah. Well, that's good. So that's pretty good. So I having to be so picky when I want to ask you. I want to make sure everything's fine. So why don't we do this? We're at our period of time to wrap up. And this is your chance to, just get your message out. Make sure that you mention your website and that people can donate to you and old guy tech too. And and just get that last bit out that you want to tell everybody.
All right, thank you. First of all, I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Thanks,
it's very nice.
You bet.
And I appreciate the people that called and asked questions. I think it's really important that the voters
that was great. Yep.
pay attention, that the voters learn who these candidates are, because as I said before, you're about to elect a judge for the next 20 years. And I have this analogy that I told you before we went on air, but generally people seem to not really care who their judges are, which really is difficult for me to understand. And maybe that's because I am ultimately so much believe in the Constitution and our structure of government. And I always say I believe the Constitution is the cornerstone of our system of government. And so the judiciary is the place where if you have a dispute, whether it's with your government or with another person, that you can have that resolved. So the idea that it doesn't matter who the judge is strange. But I liken it to, you don't really care who the ER doc is either until you're in the back of the ambulance on the way to the ER, and then suddenly it makes a big difference, just like it makes a big difference who the next judge is going to be. I can tell you that I already know how to do this job on a daily basis. I do this job in the capacity of a judge, and that I'm going to be ready to take over the first day that I'm elected. And the reason I think this is important is that I'm running for a criminal seat. We, in the counties now, have a lot more responsibility as it relates to public safety because of the Criminal Justice Realignment Act. There are big populations of prisoners and parolees that are now at the county level, and you need somebody on that bench who not only understands criminal law and the criminal sentencing structure, but more importantly, understands criminality, understands criminal mindset, and knows which people are capable of doing something other than incarceration, and which people absolutely need to be incarcerated to protect the public safety. So I think that that it's really critical that people think that through, before they vote.
Yeah, and as we said, it is important that you vote even if you feel like your vote doesn't count, and especially at a county level, it's really important. So, and your webpage is?
Webpage is www.dylansullivan4judge.com. Dylan is spelled right on the screen, Dylan, and Sullivan is also on the screen, the number 4 and the word judge.
Perfect. So remember to go visit that website. She's got all kinds of information there because I learned a lot about her by just visiting the website. And again, thank you for watching Old Guy Tech TV, and thank you, Dylan, for coming in.
My pleasure.
And don't forget, when you're there giving donations, we need it too because we run totally on donations as well. Tough way of making a living, let me tell you.
Yeah.
It is. But thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Take
and
care.
hey, thank you guys for calling. I really appreciate it. And keep watching our schedule. We've got a number of other people coming up. A number of supervisors are going to be listed here on our coming up events very, very shortly. So make sure that you tune in, watch, ask your questions, and thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.